Okay. Infrashell and Apocalisse Musicale. Welcome, welcome. Good morning. Morning. It's almost evening. Welcome to Fight Club. It's like you made that comment knowing I was gonna be dressed like this in a little bit more of a fighting outfit. I'll just wait a few seconds for the people to join. It should be all live, right? Why doesn't this graph update? It should be all good, but normally I have the... Or does that take like a full minute? No. Like my normal graph that I have here, the analytics graph isn't updating. Maybe it just takes longer than I have ever noticed. I do see people in the stream chat, so I am live. Welcome everybody. Vibrant Frequencies, AP1, Narrat, Mind B, welcome, welcome. How are you guys all doing? Yeah, it's just not updating. Not that it matters, it's not very important. I see that there's already a bunch of people here. It is updating some things, but not everything. I don't know. We'll see. Where do I send my track to? You can send your track in the Discord server by posting it in the feedback on stream page over here. Before posting, make sure that you read this stuff over here. These are the rules for the posting. So yeah, that is where you can place it. Let's see if the bot wakes up this time. Ah, now it's working, the graph. And it is, yeah, it did update in a few chunks. So, I don't know, it just didn't work before. The bot is awake, which is nice. Unlike last time, Ren didn't do that. So there it is. We're going to start with Bo here, who's also here in the chat. Welcome, welcome. Ninja Noodle. I see you sent a message but then deleted again. Hi THC, welcome as well. Yeah, we'll start with Bo here. We're just going to dive into it. Infrashell, welcome as well. If I didn't say welcome before. This is Isha Upanishad. I am really sorry, but I'm probably mispronouncing it. At least I get the Bo part right, hopefully. Either way, yeah, we'll just dive into it. Today is probably going to be a more busy feedback stream because it's the last one in 2 weeks. There won't be one next week and the week after because I will be on vacation for both of those. Videos will still come out. I'm going away the Saturday before, so I have a lot more time to actually record the videos. That will be happening all next week. I have pre-recorded everything, short and long format videos up until the 10th of August. So I need to do 2 more recording sessions of shorts next week. And then another 4 or 5 long format videos. I have everything set up for the second channel, also Projector, the Conversations with Projector series. That is all set up until mid-September, is everything edited. So there's no distractions there. So yeah, today is going to probably be get a little bit more submissions because I won't be there for the next 2 weeks. And therefore there won't be any feedback streams. Either way, let's have a listen to this first track over here. Isha Upanishad. I have no idea what that means. I hope it's not too loud or too quiet.
Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
kick and bass. It's nice and clean as well, just by virtue of it being so short, I think. Like it starts fading out a lot earlier. Nice sound design. I like what you're doing sound-wise. Mixing-wise, I would say you're not using the stereo field enough. Like a lot of the stuff that's... Except for this vocal over here, which I would argue is a sound that probably needs to be a little bit more mono since it's like a main sound, right? Like it's the main idea there. I also heard it in the intro. A lot of the sounds felt very close together. So what I would try to do is maybe widen some of the more background sounds a little bit more. I'm also not a fan of the open hat before closed hat in the arrangement here. I think it should be the other way around. From Hinduism. That's how I couldn't read it. Or pronounce it. I could read it, not pronounce it. I love the chords that you're doing here, the chord staffs. I would argue that those would need to come out a lot more than like the particle or the FM sounds that you're doing here. Also here, the squelches feel like they're very central in terms of the stereo field. Those squelches should probably be more stereo. And then you have the, you know, the big synth, the big pitch gliding synth as your main element in here. I would say this section is better in terms of its mix idea, right? You have actual stereo sounds in here. I do think the transition into this part here could use a fill, since that main melodic element stopped. If it was just like one section that is 32 bars, that could be nice. In terms of structure, it is nice to not have everything, you know, 16 bar, 16 bar, 16 bar, 16 bar, and that's up until the end of the track. But if you're actually like switching the main element, I would argue that it would sound better if there's like at least a little indication of that in the actual structure itself. It would be cool if the closed hats in this segment follow the groove of the bass line. Like which one, the ones that are loud and the ones that aren't. I like this. Was a nice transition there. Cool stuff. I like it. Artwick, welcome. How are you doing? Welcome to the stream. Yeah, I hope that the feedback is helpful. There was a few details that I would change. It's mainly the mixing thing. This is like a very small thing, but even though technically the music is meant to be played in festivals, which are often mono systems, it is helpful getting a nice stereo mix down and getting that stereo width on the supporting elements, because what ends up happening is that if your track is summed to mono, those supporting elements, because they are more stereo, will phase cancel a little bit more. And that means that you're in the mono mix naturally making more space for the elements that are important. So for example, the kick and bass is going to come through more, the hats are going to come through more, and your main element is going to come through more if you make your main element a little bit more mono. That doesn't mean that you're going to like set it up in a way that it's gonna go over here for individual elements. Maybe even for some individual elements, like a noise riser, for example. I often mix my noise risers in a way that they actually go over the 90 degrees phase shift and towards the 180 degrees, right? Like, let's say over here. So this is 0 degrees phase shift, meaning completely mono, and this is 180 degrees phase shift, meaning completely stereo. What is happening in the left channel is happening exactly opposite in the right channel. So those would cancel out and you would get silence. I would put my risers, say, over here, and then you have your supporting leads kind of over here, and then say your main element somewhere over here, in terms of how much width they have, roughly, right? This I look at a point, but that can be anywhere from here to here for main elements, depending on what it actually needs and what it actually sounds good with. Also depending on the context of the actual track that you want to go for, and there's a little bit of a writing aspect to it too, right? How wide certain sounds need to be. But mix-wise, I believe there should be much more structure in the stereo field of your track, because it allows you to basically determine which elements shine through more in the mono mix by using the negative associations of stuff kind of, I guess, how would you say, cancel out to a certain extent. You can say, okay, this stuff, we cancel it out to a certain extent, and then the rest just comes through more. Do you speak Italian too, Projector? Yes, I do, but not here on the stream. when I'm around with friends and stuff like that, I've noticed that explaining music stuff in Italian, I've had a student that wanted to do that, do everything in Italian. And I tried that for like 2-3 lessons, and it didn't work. Then Worrell has some good videos on intentional stereo cancellation. Exactly, that, yeah, exactly, that's what I mean. Enroll the V, welcome, welcome. I am indeed feeling koude warm. Next up, we do have Apocalisse Musicale with Alien Fantasies over here, with some very sus artwork. No, it looks good. Let's have a listen. Safist, welcome, welcome. Hope you're doing well. That's a very aggressive track. Is this still a build-up? Apparently this is already the drop. It felt like it didn't go in there with any rising effect. It sounded very industrial in the beginning, and suddenly the drop kind of appeared, and now it's gone as well. I feel like not everything is geared towards the same rhythm here. You have some effect there with a lot of low frequencies, that's probably not a good idea. Your kick transient is ruined. I think this is also a kick, because your bassline is bleeding into it. I feel like not everything is in key. I feel like not everything is in the same key. I feel like not everything is working towards the same rhythm. I think there's like a triplet thing in there. I think I can see that here. This is looking like a triplet, while this is straight rolling pattern. So those don't match. Key-wise, it sounds like there's a lot of stuff that is not in tune with each other. Dema, welcome. Welcome to the stream. I like the intro and like the industrial thing that you have going on over here, but to be honest, everything in the drop was a mess. Some great flows though, I disagree. I'm gonna be that honest, I feel like there was very little flow to the track. The little flow that was there was obtained with a noise riser that felt way too loud. But that was mostly because everything felt way too loud. It felt like you were trying to get every little inch of volume out of it, and that exaggerated a lot of the other problems that the track has. Like we said, rhythmically and like harmonically speaking. I also think the track is just too full of stuff. There was just too many elements playing at the same time. But also that everything is mixed up to the ceiling and is trying to break through it. It's like trying to house an elephant in this very room here behind me. It's just not going to fit. It's going to squeeze against all of the walls, and that is what you're doing against the limiter and any compressor, it feels like, in the chain that is on your master chain. So this track needs a lot of work. To be honest, I wouldn't say this track needs a lot of work. I would say as a producer you need a lot of work. Listen to reference material, listen to music that you like, listen to music that you want to produce as, and try to figure out how many elements do they use in a part of the track. Try to figure out which keys they write in and stick to that key. Try to figure out how they build up a groove where all of the elements contribute to the same rhythm, to the same groove, and see if you can do something like that. Because it felt, to be honest, it felt all over the place, this track. This is definitely somebody that either is just starting out producing and learned what a limiter was, so they used it on everything, it feels like, because they want to make like loud music, right? And that is a very natural progression for every producer. I've been at that point where I was just making stuff very, very loud. I've done that for several years. I've had the whole like dubstep phase as well, and that is basically the whole point of dubstep. But it also goes to show that you have like other problems in the production, and that is the harmony between the elements, and they're not working together to basically create one. It's really hard to explain this. The elements in the track aren't creating one idea. They aren't creating, like, it feels almost like there's 2 or 3 tracks playing at the same time. Honestly. Loud noises. Exactly. That's all that dubstep is. And that is for a long time. And everybody goes through that, right? If you're a year into your production or something like that, then we all have that moment. Oh, hey, this is a limiter. I want to make loud dance music. Let's push everything into the limiter. No limits on the artwork as well. Yeah. That's kind of true. Either way, maybe I should say this. This isn't... I might sound like a little bit negative. This isn't like something like personal to you, of course, right? That's not the point here. I just want to try to point out all of the things that I think you can improve on, and I hope that you don't take it away as me like either being overly negative towards you or something like that. We've all been at the point where you are now in your production journey, and from here you can only learn to become better. Let me quickly check if there's no Patreons in here. We did have a Patreon today, but they were also the first to submit, so they technically get to skip the queue by virtue of being first in queue, I guess. Anyway, Let's move on to the next track over here, Dema with ID. This is 150 BPM in A. I think they're also here in the chat, yes. Nice kick and bass. I like it. In the intro, I would probably also low pass it a little bit so that it's clear that it's not meant to be the part that people are dancing to yet. Like it kind of comes out of the middle, and then when the drop hits, it opens up both in the low frequencies and the high frequencies that way. It's not negative projector, it's constructive. Anyone here hopefully knows the difference. I hope so too, but still, acknowledging that I'm not trying to be negative is probably a good thing, right? I think the kick would be a little bit louder. I think the kick may need like a dB or two more. Overall, the sound design is sounding nice so far. It is a little bit on the stale side. Like I would hope maybe at some point we get like an acid line or something like that. But it feels like we've been listening to the same kind of sounds for 2.5 minutes now out of the 3 minutes that it has been playing. I think I talked about this in the last feedback stream where with these kind of chaotic drops, it's nice to not have that continuously for like 8 minutes long and instead have maybe 1 or 2 sections of the track, maybe even 3 sections of the track that isn't that chaotic, so that the chaotic stuff has some contrast to it. Currently it all feels like there's just chaos everywhere, all the time. And all of the sound design sounds fairly similar, I would say. Like you're doing a bass melody over here. Wouldn't it be cool to suddenly hear all of the elements kind of fall away, apart from maybe a few backing sounds, and this big arc with a big phaser going on, playing the same melody as your bass line? Right, something completely different than just here's more random FM sound. Which currently it feels like it's just that. Some mixing things that still need to do, of course, but this is still in production, I think. There's some louder sounds in this part over here. I also felt like the track is overall a little bit too aggressive on the high frequencies, especially like in the, I guess, like 6K area. Like you want that little boost coming from like the 10K area from the hats, right? Generally speaking, there's like a little bump in the frequency spectrum, but then there's also like a slight dip below it, so that accentuates it even more. Right now it feels like it's just like a flat line, but one that does reach the level where you want your hats to be. Yeah, I guess that's it. In terms of feedback. Projector, for every live stream your beard is getting fuller and better, or better and fuller. I'm glad you like it. It's also happening for the videos, by the way. It's just you guys see the beard of like a week ago for the videos. It is fun to watch back or edit the Conversations with Projector series, because I edited it last week and I was behind 2 months, a bit more. I was editing stuff from like late May and such, and you can really see the difference there. And from day-to-day life you don't notice it. I have been growing my beard out now for 3-4 months, maybe a little longer than that, maybe 5. And I've never, like, of course you notice that, oh, it's more than 2 months ago, but if you're editing and you see your own face and you see how it was even like 2 months ago, you can definitely see the difference. But day to day you're not like, hey, it's grown again. My beard is now longer. That looks super cool. I notice it a lot that I'm touching it more when I'm just like fully focused on something as well. I sometimes just sit here while I'm producing or listening to something. I just go like this now, which I feel is going to look very cool, but I don't know. The plan is for all of this, because right now, if I take my headphones off, I put some stuff in there, something to hold my beard down. But normally my beard it's mainly growing this way, it feels like sometimes, because it gets really wide, then it gets narrow, and then I have the thing down here. So what I would like to do is I would like to grow it out so that I can get everything and just like tie it together here with something. I probably still have some elastics or like the stuff to tie up your normal hair from when I had long hair, and I can just use that. But that is the plan. To become a Viking, indeed, yes. I will become a Viking. Isn't that a great feeling to touch your beard when you focus on thinking something? Yes, exactly. It just happens naturally, right? You're just in focus, and suddenly you notice, like, hey, I've been I've been pulling on the bottom of my face for the last half hour. Next up, we do actually have Tesla for the next submission. Make one long dreadlock of it. I don't know. I don't think I'll do dreadlocks in my beard. I think that would look strange, especially if it's just one big one, like a a big one just hanging down like that, I don't think that that would look good. I just recently learned, by the way, that dreadlocks are what happens when you do nothing with your hair. Like, it's the natural, at least for some people, for some types of hair, there's different ways and different types of hair and stuff. All stuff that I know nothing about. For the longest time, I did nothing with my hair except for tying it up here at the back of my head. And I never got like dreadlocks, but I've heard somebody say like dreadlocks is what happens when you do absolutely nothing with your hair for like a while. Are you going to pillage the churches in England during a raid? Yes. Yes, that's what I'm going to do. That is the end goal, yes. I would need to do a little bit more training before I can do that. I'm first going for the looks and then I'm going for the physique, okay? Yeah, no, keep it groomed. You'll thank yourself later. Yeah, I recently bought like one of those wooden brushes that just allows you to brush through it every once in a while. Which I do in the morning. It doesn't look like it. As I said, it really stands out. But I have some like beard oils and all kinds of stuff. It is a good idea to take care of any hair that you have. And that was also what I would do, of course, when I still had the long hair. I would shower every day and put shampoo in it and all of that stuff. So, take care of yourself. It is good to be clean and healthy. Next up, we have 2 Sentries here by Tisla. Trying to get the mix right. Please tell me what you think about it. That's what we'll do. Yeah, when you do nothing, you get knots. Dreadlocks is only lots of knots. Yes, exactly. They say like for if you don't do anything for a very long time, you get dreadlocks. But there's also ways to force it, right? Like you can start the process, I believe. Nice kick and bass. Nice and clean. Some sounds like this one over here feels too mono. Feel like the kick drum is lacking a little bit too much in what's that, like the 200 hertz, 250 hertz area. Generally speaking, I like to cut more 400 hertz on both kick and bass. I think that that's a little bit of a nasty frequency. But in this case, cut like a little bit. In this case, it feels like it's just non-existent in that frequency. Which you can see as well, right? It's almost like it goes almost completely silent here. Overall, I would say maybe the kick is a bit too focused on the sub. Maybe it's not just the lack of 200 hertz, but also that the sub is maybe a bit too much. Also there, I think it's a problem when you slide into the kick and bass like that and it becomes like massively louder. Here you can also see sometimes we have some synths that make the waveform like louder. Like actually louder. I don't think that this is too good of an example. It should maybe be, yeah, there, that was a good example. Here again, you have like some moments where the waveform just goes like this, right, where it's averaging here and suddenly it goes whoop. That is usually an indication that you're not compressing whatever element is causing that. That was another example there. You can see the kick kind of going up for the sub and then suddenly it went boom. And that's then when the note starts to play and the synth comes in. It happens when you have like maybe certain frequencies create certain resonances and that just like ups the volume. What you'll probably find is that the volume of that sound, the peak to RMS ratio is too high. So you would need to compress it. There also you have like a crash and an impact, and that just ups the waveform. That is usually an indication, and this is something that you can do yourself. I always load up a reference of my tracks when I'm mixing, which is just my own track, right? But from the production stage. And I go through in it and I see if the waveform is looking clean enough, is looking flat enough. If the kick and bass is enough responsible for the shape of the waveform. If you see that at the start of every section, you have the volume kind of going like this for a couple of kicks, that is probably an indication that whatever elements you use at the start are too loud. Right, the elements that you use to indicate the start of the next section. Sidebox, welcome. You got 2 new tracks, nice. Keith Lowe, welcome as well. How are you doing?
2 centuries locked in a box.
On my way out for dinner, nice.
Void, the dark shadows of once.
You lived for 2 centuries?
Indeed.
I was about to say like maybe the vocal has a little bit too hard of a time going through that effect, but I think you arrange it so that the vocal plays, then you have that effect, and then the vocal again, so it should be okay. I wasn't too focused on the vocal in the beginning because I was reading the chat. I like this part a lot. There's a nice stereo play going on. Some elements being very stereo, some elements being very mono. That sounds very cool. Not a fan of this long of a pause. Personally, I would probably have like a reverb tail or something in there to just signify like, hey, the song is still playing. I didn't randomly eject the wrong disc from the CDJ that was playing or turn down the wrong fader in the DJ set, right? Same to you, Sidebox. Good evening. Overall, I feel with the sound design that you've been going for throughout the track that the kick envelope isn't pitching down fast enough in the lower mids, in the lower area. Like the stuff right after the tail feels like it could be lower in frequency. You can see this is not pretty high, but this is almost like the double the frequency of what you end up being. I think you can go lower a little bit faster to get a little bit more weight out of this kick drum. It's almost like what you can see over here. You have the transient, then you have the mid body, and then you have the actual sub of it. It's almost like here, as you can see, it changes pitch from this pitch. Like it's on one pitch and then it lowers pitch over here again. Right? Also, this analyzer would point to that. Now, I've talked before in a video that this analyzer isn't the most accurate, especially for low frequencies. That is true, because you need a few oscillations before you can actually establish what an actual frequency is, to actually like display it and whatnot within the FFT, which is what is being used to display this stuff. In order to do peak detection, that is what it's called, you need a few oscillations, and we can see how few oscillations there are for the actual low frequency. There's like 4.5 here. So maybe this is a little bit inaccurate. I talked about this in the Bliss video, right? Where I recreated the baseline based on what I saw in an analyzer. And some people also there pointed out like, hey, I actually listening to the kick and bass, I don't think that that is actually what is happening. And I could maybe agree with them, with the way that they said, like, I think the pitch and down effect that was happening there that you saw in the analyzer could be explained by the analyzer being or displaying stuff that isn't really there, or maybe it's because of a phase shift that is induced by the filter closing or whatever. But in this case, it does feel like what the analyzer is telling me, that you're staying at too high of a pitch for the beginning of basically the sub part. So yeah, maybe that is something to also work on. That is a little bit more production and not mix related, so you would need to get back into the production. But if that's easy for you, then you should maybe try that out. Overall, very nice track. Next up we have... I would need to check if there's any patrons in here. Which there isn't. So that means that next up we have Infrashell. Thanks for all the work that you do for the community Hair Projectore. Your feedback has been really insightful and helped me identify problems in areas in my tracks. Again, thank you for that, and you know that you are appreciated. Thank you. My reading isn't the best today. Thank you for Projector for the sound design shorts. I've learned a lot. Thank you. Thank you for watching them. I hope that you guys are watching them, because the shorts for today did terrible. No, but you guys are very receptive to them, and they just fluctuate. It's a YouTube thing, I think. I'm not gonna rant about it today. I'm just going to listen to 301 by Infrashell. There's 30 people here and only 9 likes. The kick is created in kick drum. Yeah, then if it's still in kick drum, if you still have the instance in kick drum and you haven't resampled it for any reason, you should be okay just lowering the midpoint of where the kick pitches to, right? My reading is never the best. It is true that I suck at reading, especially when I'm like reading it out loud and stuff like that. There's a lot going on in this intro. I would personally like for that ARP to come out a little bit more.
Air and water. But you'll find plenty of both down there.
No person or breed, no man threatens a messenger.
From the crowns and heads of conquered kings to my city steps. You insult my queen. You threaten my people with slavery and death. Oh, I've chosen my words carefully, Persian. Perhaps you should have done the same.
This is madness!
This is Sparta!
suddenly you recognize the vocal. Once you recognize the vocal, once you know what vocal it is much easier to, like, pull it out of the mix when you're, like, in your head decoding what is going on in the track. You have some pretty heavy bleeding here. As you can see, these kick transients are being destroyed here, so you're losing a lot of punch there. That's a lot. It is a lot. But it's the last one in 2 weeks, so I'm assuming a lot of people are joining for that. I feel like mix-wise, volume-wise, this has the same problem as the first track in that it's trying to put... Was it the first track? No, the second track. It's trying to put a little bit too much of everything in front. Like the atmospheres are relatively loud, the support elements are relatively loud. Funny enough, the hats are relatively quiet in this mix. Yeah, you can see what I mean. You can see the waveform, just the peak level of that part was as loud as the kick and bass was. Here you again have an area like that. Not entirely, but it's getting very close, which means that dynamically there's not a lot of depth in this track. We have a new kick and bass. Looks still not cleaned up. I think also your kick is bleeding into that bass line. Because the kick drum may be... Yeah, I think then the kick drum is also too long. If it's still up here when the hats start to play, that is also where the bass line starts to play. So it's all bleeding a little bit into each other. You may have accidentally high-passed your master channel before exporting. That is what it looks like here. And you may have done that before limiter, and that may also be the reason why we get a little bit more of a pushy feeling, because that means that the limiter would work harder. Like I imagine what happened here is you set up the limiter, and then you were like, oh, but I need to high pass it before going into the limiter, otherwise the limiter is going to react to all of that stuff that is happening there, right in the lowest frequencies. Which is a little bit of a myth, you don't actually have to do that. But by introducing that high pass, you introduce the phase shift, meaning your waveform isn't the way that you want it to look for it to go into the limiter. You get bleeding in, you get transients that go a lot higher, you get things out of phase and all of the issues that brings with it. And therefore the limiter has to work harder, which is the reason why we feel a little bit of a squashed feeling now. That high pass was at the very end very intentional. Delete it anyway. It is not needed. If there's stuff in the kick and... okay, there's not gonna be stuff, by the way that we design kicks and bass lines, there's not gonna be low frequency stuff down there in the kick and the bass. And any other element that is going to have low frequency stuff should be addressed in the mix for that individual element, as opposed to in the master. There's no limiter on this mix. Okay. Strange. Everything feels so squashed. Maybe it's just your volume balance being everything too close together. I like the melody here, powerful sound. Yes, true. There's just a few mixing things here, but idea-wise, everything is sounding great. I don't know how happy you are with the final production of this track, but if you want and you have a little bit of patience, I could mix this in September for you. Because it's just a mix. The actual production itself is great. So the only thing that is making this track suffer is the mixing aspect. I probably said this in every mix, but I have a penchant for dance. Yeah, that's not really... I think I've said this before as well. I don't know if it was in response to your track, but we're presented with this, which is one audio waveform, out of which we have to grab the kick drum, the hats, the leads, the bass line, the little vocals, exactly what the vocal is saying, all of that stuff we have to manually grab out of that. That isn't actually in the thing that we're looking at. That isn't actually in the waveform. There's no kick drum in here, right? This is a combination of all of the sounds that are playing that we have to decode into kick drum, bass line, lead, vocals and atmospheres and all of that stuff. So you need to mix in such a way that a listener that is unfamiliar with your project can do that. And the reason why that is really hard is because you can solo the kick drum. You can listen to exactly the details of the kick drum and you can hear it like, oh, this is the kick drum, and then the decoding part becomes a lot easier for you. It's the same with a vocal. With a vocal, this is a very, very big problem that you often hear is people mixing their vocals too quiet or not leaving enough space for the vocals in the other elements, mainly in the high frequencies. I also thought initially that this was a little bit the case with yours, especially because you have like a little glitchy distorted thing happening on there, so they're a little bit less intelligible. But you can often hear a vocal in a track that isn't yours, and it's being really hard to hear what is being said in that vocal. And that is because when you're producing, when you're mixing even, you have that solo button in your DAW and you can say, you can solo the vocal and you can hear exactly what is being said, and then it becomes much easier to decode in the mix what the vocal is saying, right? Because you already know what you're looking for. So it is really hard to mix in a way that like somebody else can decode in the same way. I think this is one of the biggest reasons why a lot of producers, especially at the professional level, right? There's producers that work with massive artists that have been producing for 20, 30 years. They have the best of studios, the best of listening environments. They have all of the gear that you would need to mix a track. They could run it through 20 mastering compressors. They could even master everything themselves. There's still dedicated mixing studios out there. And the reason for that is, if the producer is also the person mixing it, is also the person mastering it, they already know what is in the track. So they have a harder time listening to the track from than a person that has never heard the track before and making the right decisions based on that, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Right, if you have a new fresh pair of ears, they are going to have that decoding issue just like any listener, right? Whereas if you're the producer, you're not going to have necessarily that decoding issue because you've been listening to every element soloed, you have been listening to every element while it was being produced. And therefore I think still a lot of producers that could probably do a great job mixing their music if they had the right ear for it, if they were listening to the track for the first time as a full track. But because they've heard the track through every stage of the process, they don't have that ear for that. That's why you normally have dedicated mixing and mastering engineers. Exactly. That's why it's like a staged process as well. It's also the reason why when I do a mix, I have not heard the track for at least a couple of months. Right? Whenever I start a mixing project, that project has been rendered out a couple of months prior, and I've intentionally forgotten the track. I have usually not listened to the production mix for a while either, so that I can just try my best to forget what is actually in the track and try to objectively just add all of the elements in the mix again, and usually that gets me a lot better mix. Mixing is also something I struggled with, which is why I bought your course projector. I don't think I talk about this subject in there, but I do show my full mixing workflow in there. There's like 7 hours, I think, because it's almost 24 hours for the total masterclass, my masterclass 2.0. But I forgot how long it was for just the mixing aspect. I believe it was like 6.5 hours. I have like an initial mix. The mix prep. This was the initial mixing session, which is 4 hours. Mix prep is still technically part of the production, which is where I prepare the production for the mix and render everything out. But yeah, as you can see, I guess almost 6 hours worth of content for there. This is the full edition. If you want the video only edition, that's $60 for anybody wondering. I know how the process would be done in an ideal world. Exactly, but for you, if you don't have the luxury of hiring somebody else, which I fully understand, right? If I could hand off the mix to somebody else, that would probably also get my mixes to a better quality than I can do myself. But at least trying to forget the track before going into the actual mixing session is a great idea. The second thing is exporting it out of the DAW where you produced in and importing it into a DAW like Reaper with all of the volumes normalized, for example. At least for the volume part, that forces you to have to reestablish all of the volume balances in the track, which is the biggest thing of mixing. Volume is by far the most important, not by far, but it is the most important part of the mixing. Like if you get a volume mix well, then you're 75% of the way done with the entire mix. All of the little tricks and tips that you see on the internet about multi-band compressing this and sidechain gating that, all of that is 5-10% of the mix, and then you have volume, EQ, and stereo width, and that is like 95% of the mix. I'll return to these tracks in a few months to give them a proper mix down, well, the ones that I think would be worth the effort. Exactly, I think this would definitely be worth the effort, leaving for a couple of months. You can even release this as a demo now, right? You say that you have a certain release schedule for your SoundCloud because you just want to push something to your SoundCloud every dot amount of time, right? You can say it like, oh, here's a preview, a demo version of the track, and then in a couple of months this is going to be released once I am in the right state to be able to do the mixdown for this, right? You can even do, what's it called? They don't call it a redo, but like an updated version or something like that for a track. You sometimes hear that for artists that got really big really quickly. They'll go back into their first few tracks that got them big, that aren't yet as polished as they could be, and they'll like actually do a redo. they'll have an old track of theirs and it will be called like 2024 redo or 2025 redo, whatever it would be. Should we move on? We are indeed going to move on, yes. Next track is going to be, I'll have to quickly check if there's a Patreon, which there isn't. So then the next track is going to be Mind Be here. New track, early production stage, work in progress, temporary master. Just sharing my current work, what do you think? We'll have a listen here. Feel like the atmosphere is a little bit on the loud side here. It's probably a good idea if you're going to drop the atmosphere in this section to actually cut it right when the kick hits, or even do something interesting to kind of remove it in the fill already, so that it doesn't like fade out and then, because it sounded initially like it was still going to play in this section. I like the offbeat layer that seems to happen on every other offbeat of the asset that's more stereo. Overall, I like what you're doing with the snare, that it's not just your standard 4 or 2 and 4 playing, but for something like this melody over here and the last acid line, it may be better to just full blast the snare on the 2 and the 4 and have the more like playful snare patterns in the other parts. It makes a little bit of contrast, but it also, just having it on the 2 and the 4 makes the music sound a little bit faster, I would say. But other than that, there's not much that I would change about it. Sounds very cool. Here's the OneDrive link. This is Vibrant Frequencies, also known as Shapeshifter with infinite energy. This may be a WAV file that I could play in the browser. Yes, perfect. That way we should have a little bit of a higher quality here. I don't mind this sound at all. I find it very hot. Usually the sounds are drier and shorter, I think, in this genre. I mean, Mind Be definitely has its own sound within. I get. Is this melodic full on? It is like full on, but I guess which part of it is this? I don't know. There's of course, everybody's going to have their own style even within a genre. If you just say like, okay, these are the rules of the genre and that is what I'm going to do, you're going to be making very, very boring music at the end of the day. Okay, so next up we have Infinite Energy by Shift Shaper. I may have said that wrong before. If I did, I'm sorry for that.
LSD is one of the strangest and most controversial substances known to science. A dose
Starting off
grain of salt.
too loud.
Famous mental journey into a universe of hallucination, intense emotion, and some believe mystical revelation.
Your vocals should probably not be constantly triggering the limiter like it is doing over here.
In 1943. During the 50s, LSD was used widely for research in psychiatric hospitals. Then, in the early 1960s, LSD leaked out of the laboratory.
It's Shift Shaper, not Shaper.
Bizarre and foreseen consequences. The drug was
I did correct myself, I'm sorry.
of young people seeking spiritual transcendence and an escape from the conventional world.
Starting off immediately with the open hat is a strange decision. The open hat is usually the most, or used on the most energetic parts of the track only, so having it straight from the intro is strange. While the kick and bass is nice and clean, I'm not sure I'm a fan of its tonality. It sounds very strange having the open hat without the closed hat in it. Because usually what you'll find is that the open hat is the last element that's added to the top drums to indicate like, oh, okay, we're going a step higher with the energy. Sound design is very cool. I don't like that this is very stereo here. Wanted to just say, yeah, sound design is very cool and varied. So that is very well done. Can have a better look at the kick and bass here. I personally think that the kick could be a little bit longer. It's all still a little bit squashed. Like the kick could have a little bit more sub weight to it. The bass could have a little bit less. I also feel like the bass could be a bit quieter. In general, this track is a little bit too loud, but also the difference between the kick and the bass in volume is not enough in my opinion. Kick and bass asks for darker, faster and bubblier sound. I do feel like it's indeed a fairly dark kick and bass for the track here.
Two-dimensional sacred geometry forms. Mind power. We are simply using our mind power.
Yeah, this doesn't sound like a part of the track where the open hat should be playing. This isn't energetic enough to justify the open hat, in my opinion. This is where it would be. This is where stuff is happening. A bit of a strange structure to stay high energy and then for 8 bars go low energy and then go high energy again. It almost feels like, okay, now we're going into the second part of the track. Here come the second ideas of the track and then go into the breakdown. Bit of a strange structural decision, I would say. The track is also just 5 minutes and 55 seconds long. So we're less than 40 seconds for the ending. Yeah, structure-wise, this is a very strange track here. It feels like the break is too late in the track. There should be more ideas here. This is the outro, this is the end of the track. Right, so it feels like there should be more stuff there. Overall, you're using the open hat way too much, I would say. Another thing that I noticed in this last part is that the hats and also the snare just suddenly appear. It doesn't really happen like that. What tends to happen is you lay out your structure. In this case, I believe you're working in segments of 8 bars. But personally, I always like to work in segments of 16. I think 8 bars is too short most of the time. The most rigid form of sidetrans structure is going to look somewhat like this. I recently had a student that actually wanted me to just go over the exact rigid structure of how a sidetrans track works. So we start off with 2 segments for the intro. One is completely like pads and your intro stuff, and then one is intro pads and that kind of stuff with the filters, kick and bass for 16 bars. Usually here you'll have maybe a bar of a fill or however long you want the fill to be. Say that you want that a little bit longer, you can make that 2, that doesn't really matter. But then you go into the drop, and what you'll see is that you're going to have 4 segments of drop. This one is going to have kick and bass. This one is going to have kick and bass, and usually either snare or closed hats, or snare and closed hats. And maybe you have some like loops as well and that kind of stuff. So some of the loops you can add. What you don't want to add in here is the open hat, because the open hat is maximum level of energy, right? And what you essentially want to, the way that this essentially works is that we're building up to 3 levels of energy. We have the kick and bass on their own, which is the lowest energy. This is where you hear predominantly the one shots, and there won't be like any big sequences over here. And then you have your mid energy. This is where you have some sequences. Maybe it's a little bit more of the background stuff. It's a little bit more of the kind of like groove sequences and that kind of thing. There isn't like a main melodic idea in here. And there still is some one shots in here. So this is like a mix between sequences and one shots, and then this part over here is going to be the highest tier energy. This is where the open hat comes in, and this is also where the main sequences start to happen, right? So right now it felt like we got into the track and it immediately jumped to level 3, because the open hat is usually an indication of like high energy stuff happening. So that is a little bit of a strange decision that you've made there. And overall, I thought the structure could use a little bit better use in that you had like hats and stuff like that coming in, say, for the last half of the segment. Or you had the snare coming in for this part of the segment. There were a lot of cool things that you were doing with the snare. I liked the very last thing that I heard on the snare, which was like a digitalizer effect, almost. But generally speaking, if you're adding drums to a segment, you want to just say that this is one segment that you want to add a drum to. You want to have it over the whole segment, right? Of course, not in the fill, because that is where drums and kick and bass stop playing. But over here, you want to have the drums and the loops and whatever you want to have from the start all the way up until the end. And then you can do variations in here, or add like an extra snare that just does something over here. That is all okay. But generally speaking, for your main hats, for your main snare, and for your main closed hats or loops and all of that stuff, the main stuff that's part of your top loop, you just want to, this segment is gonna have this. Okay, put it in the whole segment. This segment is going to have that. Okay, put it in the whole segment. That is generally speaking how you want to work with this kind of stuff. Overall though, very nice track. I really liked it. Some really cool sound design in there. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have 7 tracks. I think I'm going to do a quick break now. I'll listen, or I'll put on some of my music, of course. And then we move on to the next 7 tracks that we have. I'll play this. And then I want to copy over the analyzer so you guys have something to look at as well while I'm gone for just a little bit. Once the track is at the end, that is where I get back, and then we'll continue listening to some of your music, so don't leave. I just hope you enjoy what I have over here, which I should, probably solo to make sure nothing else plays, and then I'll be right back. I don't know if I acknowledged this, but I'm sorry if I ramble too much on the structure, seeing as I now see in chat that it's not yet finished. Especially the last part of the break being too late. That makes a lot of sense if the track isn't actually finished. In time I will send the finished track here. That would be very nice.
night to dream any dream you wanted to dream. Naturally, as you began on this adventure of dreams, you would fulfill all your wishes, every kind of pleasure you could conceive. And then you would get more and more adventurous, and you would make further and further out gambles as to what you would dream. So in this idea then, everybody is fundamentally the ultimate reality.
Thank you guys for all of the compliments. I'm really glad you like the stuff that I'm currently making. The plan right now for all of this stuff that I've been playing over the last year-ish, in regards to when I have a break and stuff like that, all of that music is hopefully coming out towards the end of this year in the form of an album, together with some music that you guys have never heard before. My plan is to hopefully go into mixing with all of this stuff towards the end of September, and then I have October to mix everything, and then visuals, other kinds of extra stuff that needs to be done for promo and that kind of stuff is hopefully happening towards at that same time, like November and such. That's going to be a wild time, of course, trying to get all of that done, and then yeah, hopefully before the end of the year I can release my second album. Okay, there's one new message here. So there's no patrons, meaning that we're continuing here with Mood by Better Message. Let's see. Oh wait, I need to change, Because nowadays I cannot use the analyzers that I'm using here. Maybe I should play my music outside of it. I don't know if there's a good way to do that without having to change analyzers. I mean, it doesn't matter too much. How many time to produce an album? Well, the first tracks have been in the works, like, I guess, since when did I start producing this? Maybe towards like mid 2023 is when I've started the first productions, but I've also worked on music that has since come out, right? There's been music that has since released. No, I think I started towards the end of 2023. Because all of the stuff that I was working on in mid 2023 was stuff that came out either on the first Eclipse collection that we did, and some of the tracks that I have, or some of my singles that have released since then. I think I closed out of that. Alright. Either way, this is Mood by Better Message. Let's see. Immediately going into it. It's good for Spotify. Nice clean kick and bass. I also like the tone of this. This is starting off dark. You do have some kicks bleeding into each other where you have the kick rolls there. I hope for the next one I can pause it so that I can show exactly what I mean there. Yeah, you can see it over here. All of your transients are looking nice, but you have these ones that don't look nice. You would need to resample your kick drum and just fade it out over here so that the next transient is free to play. If you're going to master this, as you can see, this transient is going to get squashed, and you're going to lose a lot of punch because of that. You're not necessarily losing punch now, I think, because you still have the headroom to do that, but once you go into mastering, that would become an issue. Spotify has become a platform where you be advised to put out 20-30 second tracks and not 2 5-minute tracks for maximum reach. That's not exactly what I meant. What I meant was tracks that have a very, very short intro tend to get more plays because people are like instantly hooked by the track. So it's good in that sense. Not so much the sense of how many tracks you're putting out, but capturing somebody immediately by immediately going into the most interesting part of your track, which in the case of a sidetrance track is the drop, right? And you can just use this in terms of, you wouldn't use something like this maybe to start your live set, right? Because generally speaking, for the first track in your live set, you want a little bit of a longer intro so that people can get, you know, you don't immediately go into it. You can kind of like build it up nicely, and then the first drop hits and people really start to dance. But for streaming and that kind of thing, hooking people in the first few seconds is, generally speaking, a good idea. Overall, the details in here, all of the little bleeps and bloops and ambience and stuff that you're doing here is really cool. I'm not a fan of the snare that you're using. And the main reason is, like, the noise component is probably okay, but I feel like it still has a very strong fundamental, which I would personally remove from it. I think, yeah, you can see it over here. That's the fundamental frequency of your snare drum. I would try to remove that because it tends to, one, not be necessary, and it clogs up the punchy part of the kick drum, right? Because it's a frequency that is low, right? It's in the more punchy area of your kick drum over here. So that tends to kind of muddy up the punch of the kick drum itself. So just removing that fundamental frequency of the snare should probably make it a better snare sound. Overall, I did notice that the mix isn't overly bright. What would also probably help you is on your hats and snares group, all of the top drums, right? To get this free plugin, the Luftikus plugin here. Set it to 40k and then just boost up until you get like that nice spicy high end that you hear in a lot of sidetrans. Or basically all sidetrans. We all tend to have that, as I've talked about before, that little bump over here where the hats are like sitting in the spectrum. Right, your normal spectrum is going to look somewhat like this. Right now it's just flowing down nicely over time, which is generally what you want for most types of music. But if you're looking at rave music, what you'll see is that there's like a little bump here in the high frequencies where all of the hats sit. Like this is also true for techno, for example. The techno offbeat hat, that almost piercing hat, comes from having a little bit of an extra bump here in the frequency spectrum. You can now see where exactly the fundamentals is. You can see that the kick drum itself does not have this frequency area, and then when the snare plays, it does sit in there. So that is the frequency that you want to remove. Cool stuff. I like it. Sounds very cool. Next up we have, this is a YouTube link. I don't know if that works in here. I think it should. Konstantinos Liakopoulos. I am really sorry. K. This is by K. This is Enigma Orbit by K. That's a lot easier to pronounce. Just one letter. Yeah, this should just work, right? Perfect, yeah. Nice melodic intro. You have some really low frequency oscillations in there. You can see the waveform kind of wobbling up and down like that. That's probably something that you want to remove, whether that's coming from the pad or whatever. Just in the mix, go and high pass the element that is causing that. Don't do that in the master, as I said before. That usually causes more problems than benefits. You
You never wanted to look beyond the clouds and the stars, or to know what causes the trees to bud, and what changes the darkness into light.
I like the vocal. The kick and bass is very quiet. The drop, I mean, is like very quiet. I think I'll have to turn this up for you guys. Given the level of the intro, this is probably what the drop should have looked like in terms of its volume. Why is that atmosphere panned to the left? Also, I don't think that what we just heard was like a playback bug. I think that was actually part of the track. It sounded like a playback bug though. I don't like that one sound panning like to the left, just coming out of the left ear. I also don't like how mono this ARP is over here. I would probably add a little bit of stereo wave to that. Yeah, this is what your breakdown should look like in terms of volume. I just turned it down by like 8 dB or something like that. This track sounds good, but on YouTube it is partially filtered and cut in the volume. Yeah, but that's not the cause of the issues that we're seeing here, right? Because that volume dip is applied equally, and the filtering is only in the high frequencies. That's only... like, it's not even that egregious in here. It's not like MP3 where at 16K you just see a dip down like that. Yeah, you can hear the kick and bass, how quiet it is. That needs to be like this. I just turned it up from 2 dB to 12 dB, so I added 10 dB to the part of the kick and bass, which is probably something that you should do in your production as well. Honestly, listening to the texture of the kick and bass, like how dark the kick and bass feels, how weighty it feels, I didn't expect so many like melodic elements and stuff like that. Feels a little bit mismatched, the tonality of the kick and bass and the elements that you're putting on top of it. Generally speaking, if you want a more melodic sound, you tend to focus the bass line a little bit more on the first harmonic or the first overtone as opposed to the fundamental frequency, right? So that you get, how would you explain it? You get a little bit of a lighter sounding bass line out of that. I think the kick drum will be okay, but the bass line sounds a little bit too dark for, I guess, the idea that you're going for here. What you would probably do is take the sub and lower that to here. Here-ish maybe. And then it should be okay, because then this harmonic is the one that is the loudest. Again, some really cool sound design, but it's very centered sounding. I like the sound, I like the rhythm. The only thing that you need to do is stereo widen it a little bit. That fill felt out of place. Also, given where you're changing the drums, it feels like the fill should happen like 4 bars later. Here you have one that lines up with the structure, right? So that is, generally speaking, what you want to do. Overall though, cool stuff. I like it. I like the sound design a lot. I like the ideas that you're going for. As I said, there's a big mixing issue in that your intro is this loud and your part where the kick and bass is and where people are supposed to dance is this loud. So the intro plays and people think like, oh, there's going to be a massive impact here. There's going to be a lot of power, and then the kick and bass is like soft and almost like in a shell. And trying to be not too disturbing to the people listening to it. But that is not what you're supposed to go for. You want your kick and bass to say like, hey, here I am, this is the impact, now start dancing please. Right? So mix-wise, a little bit of a mismatch there. And as I said, I also think that the bassline could be better for the particular synth ideas and sound design ideas that you're going for in this track. Next up we have another track by Apocalisse Musicale. I'm sending another slightly older track and probably more balanced one. I don't want to bore anyone, so feel free not to play it. That's not what we do here. We play people's music to listen to it, so that's what we're also going to do with your track, okay? It is looking very squashed in the waveform here, so I hope it's not the same. This is very sub-heavy. I think this track has too much bass. It is again having issues with bleeding into transients and that kind of stuff. The stereo field is also looking wild. I think you may be stereonizing the low frequencies here. Or maybe just stereonizing everything above the fundamental. Usually I like to keep, when I'm stereonizing something, I usually use M stereo spread here. And then I set my minimum frequency to at least like 250, 300 Hertz. But most plugins have something like that, and that's probably what you should do as well here. You can hear how squashed it is by sometimes the open hat can sit in a spot where there's a little bit less volume coming out of the bass or something like that. And you can really hear how the volume of the open hat and the closed hats in this case just changes from hat to hat, which is not something that you want. That's very harsh and loud, what you have there. It was also not clear if that last part was an actual segment of the drop or part of the breakdown. There's a lot going on here. It's. I would still say that it's unbalanced. I would still say that this is a very beginner-sounding track in the way that it's mixed, and also in the way that some of the ideas are executed. So I would say that this has the same issues as the last track that we sent. Here again, no clear indication when the drop actually starts. Right, it's not like the track pauses for a little bit and then flows into the drop. It's just like it builds up to this point, and then the drop just happens. Random triplets again. A triplet if you have a triplet rhythm, you want your whole track to follow that triplet rhythm. If you have a rolling rhythm, like 4 notes in every beat, you want everything to follow that same rhythm here. Yeah, this still has I would say, still has the same issues as the other track. Awesome live stream, thank you. Can you quickly go over all the visual plugins you are using? I cannot, because it is just a single plugin. This is Signalizer, and this is Signalizer, and this is Signalizer, and this is Signalizer. Yeah, that's the plugin that I'm using. I think in my Discord, if you're an Ableton user, I know for sure that it's there. In the pinned messages. Oh no, here are the presets, the 4 presets that I'm using for the visuals here. You can just load up the plugin and then go in here and then load the presets to get whatever visualizer that you want out of the 4 here. But also for Ableton users, there's also the Analyzers rack, which is this whole thing, meaning that it also opens up like this, right, where all of them are already in the position that you want them to be in, or at least that I want them to be in, so that my camera can be like over here. And they all have like a nice amount of space. So for Ableton users, I can give a little bit more. But if you're not an Ableton user and you just want to use Signalizer, then all 4 of these presets, the way that I'm using them, have been saved. And you can just get them from my Discord resources channel. I believe Signalizer is Windows only. So for Mac users, unfortunately, you cannot use this, I think. I am not 100% sure of that though, so check the website. If you just type Signalizer VST, you should be able to find it. It's like, I think it's an open source project. I'm sure that it's free, but it might also be open source. And I'm not 100% sure, as I said, if it works on Mac or not. Going back here, we'll continue with Mitya, with, I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. I don't think that that's pronounceable. I'm sorry if it is, but I hope that you understand that I'm going to skip pronouncing that. But this is 4690UJ. Very interesting title, very interesting image of part of a train locomotive as well. Let's listen to the music. Very aggressive, loud start here, very harsh in the like piercing 2 to 3K frequency area. Some interesting sound design though. your synths are not lining up with the kick drums. Everything is out of sync. I'm also not a fan of the bass line that you're using. For some reason it feels like there's no sub whatsoever, even though there clearly is. I know that the kick drum doesn't have any sub frequencies. Like, the kick drum has nothing. Why is the kick drum not... If you're playing offbeat, why doesn't the kick drum just extend up until the offbeat here? So that you get some actual sub-frequencies, some actual punch up until the lower frequencies out of that. I would love to hear the kick and bass just on their own, so we can make a better judgment on that, but given the structure up until this point, I doubt that that will happen in any other part of the track here. It means battery back. That's an interesting name. Again, the snare over here, we can see that it has a pretty strong fundamental and lower frequency stuff happening over here. I would filter out everything below 1000 Hertz of your snare drum. I really like this part, but why is it completely mono? All of a sudden. Strange panning of the sub bass. There's a lot of strange choices in this production, I'm gonna say it like that. Like, I would say it's pretty clear that you're beginning out, but there's also some really cool sound design things that you're doing, and overall, like, the atmospheres and the textures are sounding really nice. But suddenly the sub bass starts to pan, and overall the kick and bass quality isn't the best. Sounds like we're going to go into some very, very aggressive high-tech here. Which would be really cool if you put an actual high-tech kick and bass under this. I think this would work really well. Make sure you filter out the lowest unwanted frequencies of the experimentation that you're doing here. I think part of the sounds that you're using have like some swing in them. Yeah, that sounds very off. Here's some very experimental journey tech from Finland. I do agree that this is very experimental. I like a lot of the things that you're doing. There's just a few things that I would say is like an actual issue, right? The kick and bass is sounding strange to the point that this would be hard to dance to. There's stuff that fight against the actual rhythm that you're trying to set up with the main elements, like we heard some synths before that weren't in sync. In this case, I feel also like you're playing the bass too high. Now we have a kick drum with the appropriate amount of bass. Why don't you use that everywhere? We certainly had a kick drum that actually had some like punch and impact. I would use that everywhere. If you put that kick under a bass line like this, I think that would work a lot better than having the kick drum this high. Because now there's nothing that actually provides any substantial bass at the, like, would you call it like the golden area between like maybe 45, 50 hertz and 35 hertz, that kind of area. That is where you want to actually have some punch, either in the kick drum. I would always argue in the kick drum you would need to have some punch there, but for most types of sidetrends, also for the bass line. In this case, you could get away with not having that frequency in the bass line if the kick reaches there and it goes under the bass line and it has that punch itself. Now it just sounds weak, right? Like there's some sub-frequency over here, but I feel like even that is not really coming through in the mix. I think there's again synths that, yeah, as you can see, I cannot scroll. Hopefully we get another example that is clear, that I can just pause. There's some really cool sound design in here, but there's a few basics that I think make this track really hard to listen to. Especially the kick and bass. The kick and bass just needs to work well. And the first one sounded really off. The second one started to sound better. We had 4 kick drums in here that sounded perfect. They were somewhere in a fill that actually had some punch to them. If you take that kick drum and you use it everywhere, and then you use your high-tech style bass line also in that first part, I think this would already be a much better track. And then make sure that everything that you're sound designing is actually in sync with that 16-note rhythm that you're setting up. That is very important. There were a few areas where I thought that you were maybe doing a little bit too much. I'm also not really a fan of the BPM changes while the track is in the like dancing mood, because that just rips you out of the trance state that you're trying to put people in, right? You're trying to dance to it, and if suddenly the beat changes, you have no and you have no prior indication of that happening, that sounds a little bit off. It could be a very cool idea the way that you're moving the BPM around to do that more in the breaks, and I would definitely encourage you to keep the BPM movement but limited to the parts where people aren't necessarily dancing, and then just try to keep the dancing part. You keep the sound design this experimental. You keep all of the experimental things that you're doing in there, but you look at it through how easy is it to dance to this stuff, and then you'll probably find that a few of the decisions that you've made are probably not the best for the track in terms of just danceability for this track. Tulsi, welcome, and Oozly as well. Hey man, thanks for all the help lately. The tips and tricks have been awesome. Thank you. You are right indeed in saying that this is very experimental, and I do like this kind of stuff. I may be a little bit negative on this kind of stuff, and I've talked before in the stream why I am only pointing. Did I say that? I don't think I did. When I'm listening to the track, I only point out the negative things, or mostly point out the negative things, because I don't want to constantly talk over music, so that you guys can also hear the music without me talking over it and just enjoy parts of the track, right? So I'm not going to sit here say like, oh, I like this, oh, I like that, oh, I like all of these things that you're doing. I hope we're all mature enough to understand that that doesn't mean that I'm just here trying to be negative. I just try to minimize the amount of talking that I do while the track is actually playing. And hopefully it is clear that the sound design part and all of that stuff I really, really liked. You just need to make sure that it's actually danceable too. Getting a little too experimental, I guess. Next up we have Enroll the V. Should be clean now, which we will definitely check. This is TRREXC, work in progress. Enroll the V part versus Naked Tourist, Parvati Records. I better not get the strike from them, or a claim. This is, I think, too wide for the stereo width. You're getting to the point where this actually starts to cancel, and if it's the whole track doing that, you don't want to do that. You only want to do that with maybe some elements, like I talked about before at the start of the stream as well. It is definitely not clean. It sounds cool, and I think it isn't like this. The sub bass itself isn't clean. Like there isn't the clean oscillation that you would normally hear. This bass is different. Let's see. Yeah, here we can see that this is definitely not clean. Right, you can see now the transient is, or the kick drum is being pushed down over here. That's probably because of an oscillation of the bass. And here it's, this is probably the transient, this part over here. So this is not given enough time to fade out. So this definitely needs a lot more work to actually clean it up. I mean, the sound is there, the texture is there, you just need, you're losing out on punch because you're bleeding it from one bass note into the next, from the bass note into the kick drum. You're distorting the kick drum as well. I don't like the sound of that. I think this is the problem where you're clipping. You hear that kind of on top of the kick drum. That is not something that is often desired. Like in this last part, you can barely hear the transient, right? And that is the issue that you're going to have when you're not cleaning it, is that transient is kind of being pushed out of the way by the stuff that is bleeding into it. So that is the only problem. I think what may be the case is that I don't know if this is true, but somewhere on the mix bus or the master, you still have maybe a high pass filter that shouldn't be there. I resampled like 3 times. Did you do stuff after the resampling? It doesn't matter how many times you resample. If you do stuff after the last time you resampled, maybe you have like some plugins on there that have a high pass filter in there that is written somewhere in the manual, but you don't know about it, right? Maybe you have, as I said, some high pass on the master that you think needs to be there to remove lower frequencies that really should be integrated in the mixing process for all of the elements except the kick and bass. So there's a lot of different things that could be the case. Also, maybe you didn't do the resampling process right. Did you resample? There's an auto filter on the kick and bass. That could be, that could be the issue, definitely. When it comes to kick and bass filtering for transitions, what I like is Simplon. I think I have that, yeah. Simplon over here. The reason why I like it is this goes to below 5 Hertz in frequency, right? Auto filter goes to maybe, I don't know, 20 Hertz. Where is auto filter? Do I not have that in here? I guess I don't. For some reason. Yeah, this goes to 26 Hertz. So the phase shift by a high pass filter on 26 Hertz versus one on like 5 Hertz is going to be a massive difference. Also, I have mine set to 12 dB per octave. Maybe you have yours set to 24 dB per octave. So you're going to get double the phase shift because of that as well. There is a lot of things that you need to do when trying to get a clean kick and bass. But I do think that it's important. Sometimes it's a little bit limiting in like which plugins you can use and where you can use them and when you can use them. But if you develop a workflow that is based on always having a clean kick and bass, you'll naturally find that all of those things that you thought you needed, all of the plugins that you thought you needed, you actually just don't need. Like for the longest time, I used to add BX subfilter. BX subfilter. Do I have that here? I thought I would have added that to the menu. Maybe in other. BX master desk. I still have it installed, right? Yeah. This plugin over here. I would use this plugin all the time on my bass. And all it did is it increased the sub and it added a massive amount of phase shift to my bassline. It basically ruined any bassline that I was working on. And once I realized like, hey, you don't really need this, you can just incorporate that into the wavetable, for example, or nowadays with my most latest patches where I have the ones that I'm working on now for volume 4 of my preset pack, but also the ones that are in volume 3 of the preset pack, at least some of the ones there, they have a separate sub bass. So I can go in here and I can just say, I like that sound, but I want a little bit less sub bass. I can just go in here and say, turn down the amount of sub bass that I have. Right, so this is not introducing a phase shift because this is literally a volume. I just higher and lower a sine wave, and that is responsible for saying how weighty my kick and bass is going to be in the lowest frequency, in the sub bass of my bass line. So working in a way that, I mean, these presets over here, this is a whole different way of working, right? This is, everything is resampled into the wavetable. There's no phasing processing happening after it, at least not significant stuff. There's some EQ in the higher frequencies, but that is not going to introduce a phase shift that is so big that it actually becomes an issue of bleeding, right? Because it's only in the lowest frequencies that you have to really be careful. Like, say that you have a high pass at, like, say 30 hertz. This is going to ruin your baseline. But the same phase shift, it's going to apply the same phase shift to harmonics if you set it to 1K. This just doesn't change the waveform as much. So, of course, you're also going to lose a lot of the stuff that is in there. But the phase shift that it's applying is going to be the same. It's just that those frequencies are oscillating so much faster that the effect of the bleeding is so short that it doesn't actually matter. It's not going to bleed into any extra note. It's just in the low end that you actually have to be careful with filters and phase shift and stuff like that. I would say up until like 500 hertz, you can really cause some issues. And the main stuff that you have to be careful about is 200 hertz and below. So it's better to automate the autofilter off unless used. No, that's a terrible idea. And the reason for that is because a static phase shift, that is always there is much easier to deal with than a phase shift that is only sometimes there. So I would honestly just recommend doing it with a filter plugin that allows you to get a filter cutoff so low below where the baseline actually plays that it doesn't become an issue. Which is what Simplon does. Technically speaking, I think we can look at this if I throw... let me just quickly make a clip here. There we have some bass. And then I want to add Scope. Technically speaking, we're getting some phase shift from Simplon, which you can see over here if I turn it off and on. But you can see that it's not actually that big of an issue, right? Like, it's not bleeding into the next note and that kind of stuff. It's not causing those kind of issues. That is only going to happen once you start turning up the filter. And you will see that in the transition now we get a little bit of the transient kind of moving down because of that bleeding. And then we go higher, 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 and then it actually starts to cut out those frequencies. You'll see that this way of working, it never actually turns up the volume of the bass by a lot, which is the main thing that we want to prevent. And the main reason why we try to work in a clean way, right? So the main reason why we try to work for cleanliness. So you can see it's not actually a problem that this filter is here. It's also not steep. If I set it to 48, it will probably be a bigger problem if I lower it. Can I lower you? Yeah, now you can see that we actually start to see some issues even at the lowest frequencies. And those issues increase to a point where this could actually, you know, push the transient of the kick into a limiter, right? And it becomes bigger, bigger, bigger. And then it goes away. So there are ways that you can work around the negative side effects of filters while still having a filter in there for transitions. But turning it off and on is probably not a good idea because say that you have a setup like you have with the autofilter that is like this. This is going to be issue territory. That issue is suddenly going to appear once the filter turns on. You can see how much of an impact that has on the waveform, just turning it on and off, even though this is at a frequency that is lower than where the bass is actually playing. Like, it's not filtering out any harmonics at this point, it's just the phase shift that is being applied. Yeah, just use a filter that is not designed necessarily for that, but with the appropriate settings that actually allows you to just leave the filter on there without too many negative effects of the phase shift. Like, you're always going to have the phase shift, but at the lowest frequency, at the lowest steepness, as you can see, it is minimal. Turning it off and on, we don't even see it here. The phase shift is only really happening in this part over here. If you actually look at the bass, it changes the shape, and it changes the shape slightly, right? So this is not an issue at this point. You You can see how little effect that has. So just keeping this on here is not going to ruin your baseline. But as I said, if you go very steep and you set the filter a little bit higher in frequency, if you leave this on or turn it on and off, that is going to immediately be noticeable. That's immediately going to cause issues. So it's just a matter of getting the appropriate settings out of it. And some filters aren't capable of the appropriate settings. Some filters just don't allow for low enough of a frequency or low enough of a steepness. Anyway, let's move on. Let me quickly open these guys back. My mouse just froze. Okay. Everything crashed. That sometimes tends to happen. It was a strange crash though. It just like literally froze my whole PC. Normally I just get like a pop-up and that says like Signalizer is crashing. Because I think that this is Signalizer doing it. Signalizer isn't the most stable of plugins. But now I should just be able to open it back up and hopefully we won't have any more issues. And then we can go into The Green Man over here by Hardwicks, a projector. Curious what you think of the progression of the track. Not so much in the mixing aspect yet. I need a final drop and I'm contemplating going for a slide/offbeat bass to switch up the arrangement a bit. Thanks for the input/effort. Thank you. If you're going for a sliding/offbeat bass, I would highly suggest doing that in the second of the 3 drops. So your first and last drops are rolling bass lines, meaning that there the DJ has an easy time mixing that into other tracks. And then your second track is where you do special stuff and special bass lines and whatnot.
For centuries, mankind has symbolized nature in forms of the green man. Representative of birth, life, death, and rebirth.
I like the clarity of the vocal. Nice kick and bass. I like it. Technically this isn't clean, right? There's a little bit in here. This is not to the point where it causes a problem. We can still see clear transients, so this shouldn't be unclean where it actually causes some issues. I like the sound combination that you're using here. I think it sounds a little bit strange that we go so quickly into the transition, especially for the low pass. I felt like that was coming in a little bit fast on the kick and bass, or a little bit early on the kick and bass. little bit of a fade into that idea would be cool. This is probably where I would, since you're setting up like an offbeat idea, I would probably use an offbeat bass in this part over here. I have a few elements that play a little bit more with that idea, and I can get back into the rolling kick and bass later on. Felt like the build-up there came a little bit early in the segment, in the sense that we just started dancing and then immediately it felt like, oh, we're going out of it again. It's like there's not enough time for us to actually dance before the build-up starts. So I would probably have the build-up that you were doing there at the end of this segment instead. Cool stuff. I like it. I like where this is going. Oh wow. That's already the last track in the queue. The next one. If you still have time, my first attempt at dark/4 sound. If you guys want, you guys can submit more music. I think after this track I'll do another quick break so that I can quickly go to the bathroom as well. And then hopefully continue with some more listening to music. But if there isn't more music to listen to, then I might as well just end the stream. So if you guys have more music for me to listen to, you guys can submit more. Either way, we're going to listen to Dark Energy by Max H. Yax, I think. Max Yax? I don't know how you would pronounce it. Do they have like an actual artist name here? Alien Immigrant is their artist name. Oh yeah, now it shows. If you play it, then it shows the artist name. Lot of bright frequencies. I like it. Nice atmosphere. Nice dark kick and bass. I don't think I like this. The wild stuff that was happening there for a second. I think mix-wise there's too much going on in the mid-range here. And I don't like how the rhythms that you were setting up weren't lining up with the kick and bass. sounding a lot better here. I like it. Although some very loud atmospheres once again. For some reason it's also mainly panned to the left. It's hard to see, but I don't think that this is resampled yet. Already, like sound design wise and lining it up with the rhythm of the track, this is better than the stuff that you were doing in the beginning. It was also a very strong beginning for like the very first segment of a drop. DJs are going to have a rough time mixing that in with the track that was already playing in the set. I like that pitching melody. That's cool. One of the things that I don't like when people do this, when they have like the kick and bass coming in fully filtered, is that it leaves the drop with no impact. So if you want to do that, what I would do is suggest lowering the volume of the kick and bass, even if you want to keep the same filtering. And then when the drop hits, you just up it again to the normal volume. So that the kick and bass actually becomes a little bit louder there. I would do that with like 5 dB. Something like that. That way you actually gain some impact there, you get some extra punch and people say like, oh, this is the moment to start dancing again. I think this is indeed a little bit too, well, what happened here there? There was a little bit too much going on there. I think the hats could have a little bit of extra either volume or just brightness with the Luftdictus track that I showed earlier in the stream, because it feels like it's mixed a little bit too dark, the overall spectrum of the track. Just because you're going for a dark type of sound doesn't mean that the mix needs to be overly dark. A little bit on the loud side, those sounds here. Again, you can see it, that stuff is a little bit too loud when it starts to actively destroy the shape of the waveform that the kick and bass is setting up, which is what is happening here. Right? You want the kick and bass to be responsible for the shape of the waveform over a large portion of time. What I mean by that is if you take the 16 bars and put it in your DAW, it should just look like, okay, here it starts, then it's like a flat sausage, and then it stops again when the kick and bass stops playing. What you often see is if elements are too loud, that then the waveform looks like this and then goes zoop, where that element is, and then it continues at the same level. So that's a very easy check that you can do to see if stuff isn't too loud. Of course, there's a margin of error. Anytime that you have very high energy, that flatness is going to be a little bit higher than the parts of the drop where it's very low energy, because that's just how volume works. If you have more stuff going on, then you're going to have more volume as well. So that is natural. But if you just look section by section, those sections tend to be fairly flat. Right, again, Some parts are going to be a little bit louder, some are a little bit quieter, but the main shape of it is going to come from where the kick and bass is playing. Cool stuff. For first attempt at Dark/4 stuff, the sound design is on point. The kick and bass sounds on point, tonally wise. The ideas are really cool in the track. It just needs a little bit of extra mixing attention. I am going to take another quick break, and if I come back and there's no more music for me to listen to, then I'll just end the stream. Otherwise, we'll listen to what other music you guys have. As usual, in the meantime, I'll put on some music of my own. I guess this one over here. There's so many things that I don't want to spoil. So many tracks that I have almost finished that are really cool, that have some really cool ideas, but I want to keep them a little bit of a secret so that there's some new stuff when the album comes out. So anyway, I'll take a quick break and then I'll be back. Did I solo that? And we don't have to loop it. And then I'll play and be back when the track is over. See, there's one more track right now to listen to. I'm just going to sit here now and listen to music until there's no more music left. So that might be just one more track after the break. Right. Let me just open up the analyzers again. And then we have another track by Apocalisse Musicale. Thanks for the advice. I'll try to implement it. I'll put in another track. So this is Galactic Night. Again, Apocalisse Musicale is the artist. This should play, right? I think this is going to have the same issues just looking at the waveform down here. You see it? It's just like flat, like that. Which probably means that this is over compressed and over limited. Which you can already see, it's like very loud everywhere. Which you definitely don't want. This is also painfully resonant there. I like this bass in the intro though, that sounds really cool. Like, the ideas are really nice, it's just over compressed here. Resonant to the point that it sometimes just hurts your ears as well. And I think sometimes you're going a little bit too wild with some of the ideas that you're doing. This part is really nice in terms of just the ideas. You should try to see if you can get the cleaner low end. I think one of the things that is happening is that you're stereoizing your low end again. That would explain the very wide stereo width over here. Your top drums are also fairly dull sounding, like there's no information above 10k in this track almost, meaning that the whole track sounds very dark mix-wise. I don't understand why you keep your bass in the breakdown. In parts like that, it's better to just remove the sub bass, because it's not doing anything there. Like, you're not dancing there, you're waiting to get back into the dancing, so it's nicer that the impact from the sub bass comes back when you start to dance again. I don't know if this is in key. It sounds a little bit strange, the tune. I've said before that I have a really hard time with pitch and stuff like that, like I'm not musically trained or whatever, I cannot hear when stuff is really out of key. Like if it's really out of key I can hear it, but if it's like dodgy then I cannot judge that kind of stuff. Every once in a while having a fill between where you switch from elements would also be nice. Just like one bar where the kick and bass is not playing so that resets the listener, they can get back into the groove of things and they can start dancing again. Overall, you have cool ideas. You just need to work on the execution of those ideas. And your track has a long outro where nothing is happening. Like it has the fade out and then it stops and then it plays for another 10 seconds maybe. Or there's like silence at the end of the file for 10 seconds. Can I like show this? Yeah. This is where the ending is, this is where the fade out is, and then you can see there's like another 5-10 seconds maybe. Yeah, 10 seconds of just silence. Which is probably not needed, so you should probably remove that. It's probably annoying for people to listen to 10 seconds for nothing if they have this in the playlist. So, yeah, that's something that you should probably not have in there. Anyway, it looks like we again have no more music, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to end the stream here for today. I've gone through all of the things that you guys wanted me to listen to, so that's going to be it. Keep in mind, guys, that next week and the week after the Sundays there won't be a feedback stream. I'll probably also not stream during next week because I have a lot of work to prepare for, as I said, going on vacation and that kind of stuff. In fact, right after this, I'll probably record some more videos. Just to get ahead of the recording process that I need to do. So that means that for a while there won't be any streams. I'm taking a little bit of time off. Of course, the other content is still just going to come out 2 shorts a day and a long format video every 2 to 3 days. There's stuff coming out on the Also Projector channel, the Conversations with Projector series. For those that don't know, I have a secondary channel where I also post stuff that is highlights from my live stream or interesting conversations from my live stream. For anybody that isn't subscribed yet, there you have the link. And you can see this is just live stream stuff from like 2 months ago. It always takes me a lot of time to actually get it edited and get it out there and making the thumbnails and all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's going to be it for today and for a while. I hope you guys enjoyed the stream. I hope you guys enjoyed the content that's coming up. And I'll see you guys probably towards the end of August, maybe even beginning of September, because right after my vacation, I'm also moving to a different apartment. So I'll be a little bit busy with that then as well. But yeah, see you guys.